Hi, I'm Will Johnson, also known as Power Nerd Insights. I work as a Senior Power Platform Specialist for Vantage 365, and I'd like to welcome you to this Power Nerd presentation. So, hello everyone, welcome to this week's Friday session in the Power Apps Challenge Discord server. My name is Will Johnson. I am now head of Power Platform and have been a Power Platform developer for the past 6 years. I host these sessions as a way to teach and train others and pass on a little bit of that knowledge that I've picked up through my time. This week's session will be covering Dataverse tables, continuing on my first series, which is all about your first interactions with these tools within Power Platform and making it as smooth as possible, giving you that information you need to confidently make your first move into using these components. We do have a bit of a solid run today. Dataverse and Dataverse tables are quite a lengthy topic, so we do have a bit of an agenda. But before we get to the actual items on the agenda, we have our introduction. That's where we are now. So obviously, as I said, my name is Will Johnson. I've been a Power Platform developer for the past 5 years. Currently working as head of Power Platform for Vantage 365, and have built multiple different solutions spanning multiple different components, including kind of Dataverse tables as we're learning today, all the way through to a bit of Power Pages as well. I do have a bit of ground rules for these sessions. So one ground rule is there is no such thing as a stupid question. We're all here to learn. We've all been beginners before. We've all wondered, hey, can the platform do a certain thing? Can I get it to do X, Y, Z? So if you've got the question in your head, please do ask it. Doubtless that if you've thought of the question, someone else has thought of it and hasn't asked. We're all here to learn, so please do ask. But that being said, we are going to look at kind of what we're covering today. So the very first thing we're going to cover is how we actually get to seeing Dataverse tables within our environments, and how we see what tables are there. We're then going to go through a few of the ways of how to create a table in Dataverse. So we're going to start with the most common way that people find the Dataverse table creation first, which is via Copilot and the new interface. And then we're going to look at creating a table via advanced properties, and picking it up that way, because sometimes that can be a little bit more user-friendly than natural language processing. While we go through creating a table, we are going to look at the different types of table that we have available to us in Dataverse, and I'll walk through them and some of the features that we have when we create a new table to be able to pick that up. Once we create a table, we'll be looking at how we edit a table. That includes editing things like forms, views, the different types of views that we have available to us, the different types of forms that we have available to us, and where those might turn up when we use them. And then once we've looked at how we edit a table and all the options that are there, we will move into our discussion section where everybody's welcome to ask questions. If you do have a question during the course of the session as we're getting through the content, please do post it in the chat, and we'll make our best efforts to get to them at the discussion section and answer where we can. So with that being said, let's get started with how do we actually get to Dataverse tables. So how do we get to Dataverse tables? Now you'll have to bear with me here. It appears something's been left up. See, this is going to be fun. I should have set this up preemptively. When we first navigate into Power Platform, we come into, a lot of the time, make.powerapps.com, or we land in Power Apps or Power Automate or somewhere like that through the kind of waffle menu over here. But we're working with Dataverse tables here. We want to be able to create a Dataverse table. How do we do that? Well, the first thing is we need to find this tables option over here. Now in Power Apps, this tables option will be available on that left-hand side as a very top one beneath AI Hub. If you go to Power Automate, it might not show up. So coming in here, you can see over here, tables hasn't appeared. If the option for tables doesn't appear, you're looking to hit the more option and then tables. My preferred way of accessing tables is always through Power Apps, because even if you try to access it through Power Automate and you choose that tables option from the more menu, it's going to take you to make.powerapps.com to be able to get to this. So this is where we see our Dataverse tables. This is how we get to them. And as you can see, there are a few tables that are already created in certain environments. There are some that I've created. But there's tables that are listed under here that are already provisioned for you when you get into your environment and the Dataverse tables interface. You'll more often see account right here, which you can see is a core table. Address, which is a standard table. Things like appointment, which are tagged as productivity. These are tables that are created for you and you're able to explore and edit as you need to. But this session's about how do we work with them as a whole. So the best way to learn that is to actually create one. But how do we do that? Well, as you can see up here, we've got a few options. We've got getting started with Copilot, starting with a blank table, creating with Excel or a CSV file, or creating with a SharePoint list, which is relatively new. That's in preview. But most of the time, we're going to be looking at hitting start with a blank table. This is the new interface in terms of the way of doing things. What you'll see here is you have a kind of table view grid where you can click on a specific table, give it a name. So right here, I'm going to call this testing table. And then when you look at it, you can see that it's already had a column in there called new column, and it's got a little key symbol next to it. That's because this is identified as what is known as the primary name column. So just be aware that that will already be created. You have the ability to drag and move around to change how things are seen. You do occasionally get the feedback option pop up, the ability to zoom out and zoom in. But what use is that when we only have one table? We'll get to kind of why you have the ability to do that in a moment. But that's our main kind of table creation canvas area where we can view our tables. When we come down to this bottom section here, you can see we have the option for new row, which is going to create a new item of data in that table. But we have the option for new column. If I click new column, it's going to bring up this little interface here. I'm going to say single line text column. Choose a data type. I'm going to leave that as single line text. We'll get into a bit more of that when we look at editing tables. And then hit save. And right there, I've now been able to name my table, give it an extra column, and do a few other things. You do also have the option in this kind of space to create multiple tables. So up here, you've got new table, and I can choose to add columns and data or just describe the new table. And again, we've still got the file and SharePoint options here. And as always, we have Copilot on the right to give us a bit of an assistance. So I can type in a prompt just there. And what Copilot is going to do is it's going to pick up that prompt and it's going to say, hey, not a problem. I'll create you a new table. We should see it kind of work pretty quickly. There we go. So you can see there, it's created a table called dog. It hasn't quite got the word dogs, but it has put dog name in as the first column in there. And just like the normally created table, you have the ability to edit the name. I'm going to sit here and hit dogs. And then if we click into this table that was generated using Copilot and hit view data, you can see that if you've generated a table via Copilot, it'll already add some data into that table for you. So just be aware of that if you are using this interface when creating your Dataverse tables. You are going to see that some data is already put in on your behalf. So I've created my tables. I can now hit save and exit. And what it's going to do is it's going to give you a prompt. Hey, when you're done working, we're going to save the tables and off we go. So I've just created those two tables, but where have they gone? We can't see them. They're not in the list here. Well, this list is quite extensive and it's also separated out by recommended, custom, and all. But what do these options mean? Well, recommended tables are the tables that you have interacted with recently or that the system believes might be of interest to you. So the account table is normally at the top of this, and you can see I've got a few other tables that I've interacted with before. The custom option is all the tables that you have created yourself. So you can see here I have a load of tables, but there's my dogs table. That's been created. It is known as a custom table because I have created it. And there is potentially another table in there. Let's have a scroll down. Let's hope we can find ST. So we've got test standard, testing choices, testing table. So there's the table I also just created. So they've both been added to the custom tag here because they are tables that I have created that are custom. And then you have the all option, which obviously includes all of the tables. and they're by standard sorted by alphabetical order. Now, that is creating a table with the new interface. Obviously, a lot of it is Copilot heavy, some few clicks around, and there's a few other little bits as well. There is another way to create tables in terms of starting with an entire blank table rather than starting with Excel or a CSV file or a SharePoint list. And that is through here on the top left. It's called New Table, and then you have Create New Tables, which does the same as this start with a blank table. And then we have Table Advanced Properties. This is the old interface for building tables, but I find a lot of the time it's a little bit more useful when we're learning and starting with Dataverse tables to use this interface because it's a little bit more intuitive. So right here, we define a display name for our table. So I'm going to call this kennel, and it'll automatically create a plural name for you. You give the table a description. So we're listing kennels. And then you have a few other options in here. Now, this enable attachments option does have an impact. There is a table that is already created inside of Dataverse called attachments, which allows you to list related things against an item in another table. This is like you see notes and files. If we tick that, what that means is we're going to be able to store notes and files related to the kennel against that attachments table. We're not going to tick that for now, but it's an awareness piece that's there. But when we open up advanced options, we can see in the kind of new table interface here, there's a load of other options. So it's got a schema name. This is again something that is automatically generated. It's worthwhile knowing that it's there. But then we have type. Now, normally when we create an interface, create a table through the start with a blank table interface, this is created as a standard table. When we come through the new table with advanced properties option, we have the option to set that type here. And there's 4 types. These are standard, activity, virtual, and elastic. But what's the difference between them? The difference between them is relatively simple. Standard tables are our most common type, and they are the one that essentially we're going to show creating today, and the one that we've shown being created through Copilot. These tables can be customized by users with appropriate privileges in the environment. So these are people like your environment makers, your system administrators, and your devs. And they're typically used to store structured business data. Activity tables, which was the second option down, are a special kind of standard table. They're designed specifically for tracking time-based interactions such as things like appointments, tasks, emails, phone calls, things like that. These are things that have essentially a defined start and end date. Because of this, activity tables come with some additional columns pre-made for you. So these are things like the subject column, a start time column, a due date column, a duration column, and the records that sit within, or the rows of data that sit within an activity table are owned exclusively by either a user or team. They can't be owned by everybody in the business. We will do a session on the security model in Dataverse at another date, because that's going to walk you through kind of what that ownership means. But it's worthwhile noting that for activity tables, they are owned exclusively by a user or team. We then have the third option down, a virtual table. So these are essentially custom tables that do not store data directly within Dataverse. Instead, they provide a real-time view of data that's coming from external systems such as an Azure SQL database, directly from SharePoint, or from other data providers that we have a connector to that we can pull information from. Then we have the fourth option now, which is elastic tables. Now, this is a relatively new-ish option, but these elastic tables are essentially optimized for handling very large data sets. And when I talk about very large data sets, I'm talking data sets that often exceed like tens of millions of rows and are designed, and so because of that, these elastic tables are designed for high volume kind of log type data. These are slightly different from your standard kind of table or your activity table in that they aren't run by Dataverse as a whole. They are powered by Azure Cosmos DB, which allows for scalability. So those are the 4 different table types that we have available to us. When we come into choosing one, make sure you pick the right one for what you're trying to do. If you are looking to do something, track something that is time-based, has a defined start and end date and a duration, you're probably going to want an activity table. If you're looking to bring in data that already exists in Azure SQL and you don't want to have to recreate it, use a virtual table. If you just want a normal table that you're going to be able to edit and store data in, and it's not going to be, tens of millions of rows, go for a standard table. If you have tens of millions of rows, go for an elastic table. But I'm going to choose standard for now. We have a record ownership option. Now, this is either user or team or organization. Again, worthwhile noting that this is part of Dataverse's security model, and that this option is here, but we won't be reviewing it today. And then we have a number of options down here that deal with changing how the table behaves, such as things like applying duplicate detection rules, allowing auditing, tracking certain changes, and a bunch of other items. For instance, one here that's quite good is appearing in search results, or whether the table can be taken offline, which allows offline capability for Dataverse tables. So that is the properties of the table. We then have the next tab over when we're creating a table using advanced properties. This is the primary column. Now, for those that aren't aware, Dataverse tables already have a primary key column created when you create the table, which stores a GUID, lovely little unique reference, which when you read it means nothing to the standard business user. This primary column option here gives us the ability to create a single line of text or auto number column. That means we can give some meaningful information to whoever might be using this kind of table and looking up to it. And we'll get to that a little bit later about what that means. But for now, we give it a display name and we say kennel name. Once we've set all our properties and we've checked what we need to check, we've set our table type, we then hit save. And there we go. That's the second way of creating our table. We've created a table with the advanced properties, and this has taken us to our table editing interface. Now, when we first come into this can look quite daunting, but it's not as much as it might seem. As you can see, over here at the top, we have three sections. Schema. The schema is all about how the table that you are creating is structured. Columns is pretty self-explanatory. If we click in here, we see a list of all the columns that we have in our table. Obviously, this is a brand newly created table, so we've only got our primary name column plus the standard columns that get created when we create a table. If I want to create a new column, I come in, I hit new column, I can give it a name, and I can say, let's say, access date, give it a name, give it a description, choose a data type. Now, there are multiple data types here. So we have text, which allows us to pick up things like single line of text, rich text, emails, phone numbers, URLs, and then obviously we have plain and rich text for multiple lines of text. It's worthwhile noting that when you are creating a Dataverse table and you come in to customize it and create a new column, take a look at what the options are for your data types. A lot of these will come with pre-made database level kind of pattern matching, such as email. That means if someone tries to submit a record to this table and tries to provide a bit of data to this column that isn't an email, it can reject and provide error handling back. So it's worthwhile picking the right one. When we come to a number, we've got whole number, decimal, float, language code, durations, and time zones in there. Date and time, we've got date and time and date only. For now, I'm going to choose date only because this is a kernel access date. We have lookup. We'll get into this a little bit when we look at the relationships kind of aspect of editing a Dataverse table. Choice columns, currency columns, auto number columns, and file columns, which allow us to store a file or the base64 file against a record. There are a few new data types in there. So prompt is currently preview. This allows you to create a prompt essentially against the data. And then the column will automatically generate content based upon that prompt. And then we have formula, which allows us to use Power FX to define a formula for it. Obviously here, we're going to use date and time, date only for this. Again, we have behavior. This is 3 options in here: simple, calculated, and roll up. Calculated is being discontinued. This is being replaced by the formula column. So my suggestion is get used to using the formula column. Try not to use the calculated column. Eventually, this behavior dropdown will become 2, simple and roll up. Simple is how you would expect it to behave. You put data in. Roll up allows you to essentially define a way to look at information that's related to this specific record and then do calculations against it. And then you can set the requirement, whether it's business recommended, business required, or optional. And again, whether we have searchable, whether we allow form fill assistance from Copilot, and then we have a few kind of advanced options here. So time zone adjustment is one that pops up specifically for date. This is why I've chosen date for this one. If you are doing any kind of date work and you need it to always be in UTC in terms of how Dataverse stores the date and time, choose time zone independent. Elsewise, choose user local. And then we have the options of things like column level security, which again, that's very deep in the weeds of some of the kind of security model bits, but worthwhile noting that the options are there. So I hit save, and there we go. I've added a new column to my Dataverse table. I've changed that Dataverse table schema, so its structure. And if I come into this preview section down at the bottom, I can go kennel access date and hit save. And there we go. I've added my column. The next option down in the schemas section is relationships. Now, Dataverse is very, very good at enabling us to have what is known as a relational database model. What that means is we can have relationships between 2 different tables. Now, you'll notice that I created a table earlier called dogs. Well, actually, multiple dogs might belong to a single kennel. So I need to create a relationship between those 2 tables. Now, you can see here, there's already a load of relationships created. There's different relationship types. If I choose new relationship, in this case, I'm going to be looking at a one-to-many relationship. That means one kennel to many dogs, right? If I was doing it from the dog side of it and I was looking at the dogs table, this would be a many-to-one relationship. There is a many-to-many relationship where you link multiples together. That creates what is known as a joining table. I could cover that at another time, but that one is very rarely used. So I'm going to choose one-to-many, and you can see here it's got a table there, and I'm going to search in dogs. And I hit OK. And hey, it's saying it's going to create a lookup column in the dogs table. Can I give it a name? If you establish a one-to-many relationship, it's going to create what is known as a lookup column inside of the table that is on the many end of that relationship. So make sure you name your lookup column. I'm going to leave mine as kennel. And make sure you set your lookup column requirement when you're establishing a relationship here. There are a few kind of general options. You can give it a column description, and then there's some advanced options in terms of what we want to use. Setting kind of things like cascading and relationship behavior. But for now, hit done. And there we go. I've created a relationship. Now, when we created that dogs table, the only column we had in there, other than the standard ones, was the dog name. If I now go to that table, because I've created a one-to-many relationship to it, and I go to columns, we will actually see an additional column has been created here called kennel. That is because I have created a relationship between the 2. What that means is, if I put in some information into my kennels table and say this one is called 1, this one is access date is, let's say, today. And we've got kennel 2, and the access date is tomorrow. Now that that's done, I can come into my dogs table, And we can see Bella, Duke, Luna, Max, and Rocky. If I choose kennel, well, they don't have a kennel assigned. It has this little lookup icon. That means I can click in here and I can see, hey, Bella's in kennel 1, Duke's in kennel 2, Luna's in kennel 1, Max in kennel 2, Rocky's in kennel 1. That allows us to, as the column name suggests, look up information from other tables and have it tagged against this specific record. So we've looked at the table structure in terms of columns and relationships. There's this option down here. Now this one called keys is a little bit different to columns and relationships, which change to some degree how the table is structured. The keys part of schema allows us to create what is known as an alternate key. But what does that mean? What does it do for us? Alternate keys allow us to basically take a number of columns and combine them together, and what it ends up doing is enforcing unique values. So let's say I chose kennel name and kennel access date as a key. What this key is going to do is, if I have a kennel 1, try to create a new record called kennel 1 that has the same kennel access date as my existing kennel 1, the system is going to turn around and tell me we can't create that because the key that would result in it would not be unique. So this is a really good way of enforcing unique values, and I'll kind of show this at the moment. So this kennel unique key. The joys. Let's just go for kennel name then. Fingers crossed this works. So they do have a size limit, as you've seen with that error message. But now that I've chosen kennel name, if I come into my table and I try to put in kennel 1 again, it should reject it. Pending. That'll be why it hasn't rejected it. So this is a good point to raise. If your key status is pending and you try to create new data while that key status is pending, it will still allow you to do it. So for this to take effect, you need to make sure that the key is not pending before you start to create data. So for now, I'm going to hit edit and I'm going to delete this record here. There we go. It's now active. So now that it's active, we'll see a slightly different behavior when we come in to add in kennel 1 again. One row is not saved. It's not saved because the key that we've just created means that the kennel name has to be unique. So worthwhile noting, it doesn't change the table structure like the columns and relationships do, but it does change the table behavior. So the next section across, forms, views, charts, and dashboards. Charts and dashboards are pretty self-explanatory. They help you create charts and then dashboards based upon the data that's within your table. The two ones that are most used and very useful to know when you're first starting with Dataverse are forms and views. So if I click into forms, we'll see that there are 3 forms already created for me. There is a main form type, a quick view form type, and a card. And unfortunately, they are all the same name. They are all information. But what are forms? Well, they're a way of us interacting with a single record of data. If I come back to kennel and I hit edit just up here, and then I choose kennel 1, you can see I have this option saying edit row using form. Forms are how we interact with our records and our data. So you see here, it opens up. It's going to ask me to sign in. Well, that's handy. I'm supposed to be a system administrator here. There we go. So you can see here, it's got kennel name and owner. I can change the kennel name and say, hey, this is kennel name 15 for the sake of this. Save and close. Job done. And there we go. That's updated. Forms are how a lot of our users will interact with our data when it comes to our Dataverse tables, if those Dataverse tables are being used in model-driven apps. Spoiler alert, that's next week's session. But we want to be able to edit them to make sure that we give users what they need. So the most common one that will be used is the main form. So I'm going to come in here and edit this. And it's very simple. We have an interface here, Very similar to the Canvas app interface, whereby we've got a properties pane on the right hand side, a way to add things on the left hand side, and a menu bar up the top. To be able to add records to our form or fields to our form, we just take from this left hand side, drag it across, and drop it in. And then once we've done that, we hit save and publish. And there we go. We've edited our form. Now, this interface is the same for whether it is a quick view form, a quick create form, a card form, or others. If we want to create an entirely new form, we can do that. We have a new form up here, and then we choose what we want to do. So we've got main form, quick view form, and quick create form. Right now, the quick create form is disabled. That's because quick create forms are used in model-driven apps and essentially are a way to create items quickly and rapidly. I can show that in a moment with a different kind of solution I've got. Quick view forms are a way of displaying data about a related item onto another form. Card forms are basically, as it says there, used to display compact data in a card layout in a subgrid or view. Worthwhile noting kind of where these turn up. Card forms turn up in subgrids or views. We'll cover those when we get to kind of model-driven apps and customization there. Quick view forms are a way to display data from your specific record that you're looking at here onto other records. And main forms are what we've seen a moment ago where we're editing them. So when we're looking at them, very simple interface. Click on them, edit them, drag your fields on, do what you need to do. Views. These are slightly different. You can see here we've got active kennels, which is a public view. We've got kennel advanced find view, which is an advanced find view, as you can see there. Associated view, lookup view, and active kennels, which is a quick find view. There are multiple different types of view that you have available to you. This is how you see the information that you have. So if I choose active kennels, this shows all the records displayed here, as you can see, and what columns or bit of data are being shown. So if I move across and put kennel access date on by dragging and dropping, that's going to add that into this view. Very similar interface to kind of your forms view. And you have the ability as well to choose related. You can see here I've got a number of items. If I was editing the dogs table and its main view, I would be able to access the kennel name and add that onto the view. And I can show that in a few minutes because it's relatively useful. That is enabled by the lookup column and the relationship that we created earlier. But once we've added our fields onto the view, we can hit save and publish, and that's going to update that. We have a few views here. There's a number of view types. We've got public view. This is what is seen when you add a Dataverse table to a model-driven app. Again, I'll show an end result of that. And it's what you see when you navigate to the table. Advanced find views are used when you are using essentially an advanced find feature. If I click on this, bear with, you can see that right now it's kennel name and create on. I could drag that in. These are separate. Now, if I hit save and publish, these views are used in different places. Rather than just one view, Microsoft gives us a few options. Now, if you bear with me one moment, I'm going to show you a model-driven app, which is where we will see a lot of these forms and views. So, this is a model-driven app that I have created for a ticketing system. You can see here, this is the public view for a table I have called iHub Tickets. I've added the ticket number in there, the created on, when it was submitted, current ticket status progress, and those columns in there. When I click on one of these records, I then see the main form of that record. If this specific ticket has a lookup column, I can come in here and you can see, if I hit all records, this is going to show me what is known as a lookup view. If I then hit advanced, this is the advanced find view. This is what we see. So you can see here, I can choose what ticket type it is. And this is information from another table. Each of these views turns up in a different place. So when we look at the public view, this is what this is. Right now, I'm seeing the public view of the iHub tickets table. When I click into this ticket type is part of this ticket types table. It's just over here. The public view of that looks like this. If I come on to that ticket and click into here, this is the lookup view of that ticket types table. If I hit all records and then hit advanced, this is the advanced find view. Obviously main form there. I would normally have an example of a quick view form, but I tend not to use them too much. Yes, those are the different types of view and how we edit them, how we update them, and where they get used and where we'll see them. When we come into Kennel, we've done our table definition when we're looking at schema. We've updated our data experience by changing how people view the form and the views and knowing what views go where. Now we have customizations. This is essentially extra items that Dataverse adds, which allows us to do a few things. Business rules essentially allows us to change how our form behaves in a way that is similar to Power Automate performing specific actions, or in Canvas apps when you show or hide fields on a specific form. Commands allows us to create custom commands using PowerFX or JavaScript that can be added to a command bar for this specific table. Row summary essentially allows us to click the button and, hey, it's going to say describing the rows and columns you want summarized, and it's going to give you a summarization of the data that is in your information. So I want to summarize kennel with kennel name. With being kennel 15. Test that out. Handy. As it stands, currently not working. Yeah, that's how we edit our table, how we get into things, and how we kind of change how our Dataverse table looks, how people interact with our data, how we might add different columns, define relationships between information. The end result of a lot of what we do in crafting our Dataverse table in terms of the columns, relationships, forms, views, all ends up a lot of the time inside of either how we interact with it in Canvas apps, if we're using Dataverse in our Canvas apps, or how we configure our model-driven apps. Specifically for model-driven apps, the knowledge to be able to edit forms, views, and do a lot of the interaction with that is kind of necessary to be able to produce a model-driven app properly. And we're actually going to look at that next week. Thank you for watching. I hope you found it useful. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments.